Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee via the Skype media. The first item on this morning's agenda is the election of a chairman. Can I have a proposal for the floor, please, for the nominated chairman for this morning?
I would be happy to nominate Councillor David Flagg.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Fire, you might need to just unmute your microphone.
Yes, I'm happy to second that.
Morning, Dwayne.
Morning.
Thank you very much. The first thing we need to deal with this morning is housekeeping. Can I ask the officer, Nicky, would you be kind enough just to run through the housekeeping this morning?
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully, Subcommittee. Please note that the first part of the meeting, up into and including the exclusion of the press and public, are council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure that the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Please mute your microphone when you are not talking. At each party representation, the flag is questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please type RDS speak in the instant message on the bottom of the screen and click the arrow button to send. Please note this panel is visible to all parties. Finally, please ensure the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicky. Unfortunately, your connection was part inaudible. Are members happy that I try just to run through the housekeeping measures once more? Councillor Butt?
Yeah, my camera isn't working. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I can't connect to this camera. Close any active conversations or other programs that are using your camera and then try again. Well, I don't have any. So is there to help? Richard, could you help at all, dear?
Max or Richard, please.
Perhaps his camera isn't working either. Oh, that's rather unfortunate. I'd rather like to see what I'm saying. Okay, all right. If you don't want any animation, fine. So that's that then. There's nothing we can do about that. Okay, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, I think it would be a good idea just to run over those housekeeping rules.
Thank you, Linda. I've just managed to find the housekeeping rules, and I will read them out once again.
Thank you.
Please note that the first part of this meeting, up to and including the exclusion of the press and public of the Licensing Committee, is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the chairman. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. After each party has made their representation, the chairman will ask each person in turn if they have any questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please type in RTS, that is request to speak, in the instant message conversation panel on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and click the to arrow button to send. Please note this panel is visible to all parties. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. Members, item 2 on this morning's agenda, apologies for absence. I believe we're all here, and I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Kelsey, who's the reserve member who's joined us as well, but will not be taking part in the meeting. Declarations of interest. Can I ask Councillor Judy Butt, do you have any declarations of interest for this morning's meeting?
No declarations of interest, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. And Councillor Farr, do you have any declarations of interest regarding this morning's meeting?
No declarations of interest, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. Protocol for public speaking. Please note that the revised protocol for virtual meeting has been circulated with the agenda sheet. Moving on then to item 5, application for a new premises licence, the Fox Cafe, Red Hill Avenue. I will now ask each participant to introduce themselves and state their role. I am Councillor Flagg. I am the chairman of the subcommittee this morning, and I am joined by Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Councillor Mrs. Judy Butt. I am a member of the Licensing Committee and a member of this subcommittee this morning.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Farr.
Hello, I'm Councillor Farr, member of the Licensing Subcommittee and Ward Councillor for Kinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. And would you just like to introduce yourself as well, Councillor Kelsey?
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. I'm Councillor Dave Kelsey, East Clifton Springbourne Ward. I am the substitute member for this meeting this morning. I will be looking in and out throughout the morning just to check that everything's still okay.
Thank you, Councillor Kelsey. Can I then move on to Mrs. Linda Cole, please?
Hello, it's Linda Cole. I'm the legal advisor this morning.
Thank you, Linda. Nicky Hooley.
Officer and clerk today.
Thank you, Nicky. You appear to have a little bit of a problem with your connection, but hopefully that will right itself as we go through the meeting.
No.
Next on my list is Trudi Barlow.
Yes, good morning, Chair. It's Trudi Barlow Licensing. I shall be presenting the application for the Fox Caf from the licensing perspective.
Thank you, Trudi. Nanka Randall.
Apologies, Chairman, but can't appear to have left the meeting.
Sorry, Nicky, could you repeat that again?
Councillor Butt appears to have left the meeting.
All right, okay. Thank you. We'll just hang on for a minute. Hopefully she'll pop back in. I understand Joseph has very kindly invited Councillor Butt back in, so hopefully looks like she's there. Are you back with us, Councillor Butt? Are you back with us, Councillor Butt? Councillor Butt is appearing on my screen, but
Sorry, I got thrown out. I don't know what happened there, Mr. Chairman. My apologies. I've come back in again. It just threw me out.
Welcome back, Councillor Butt.
Sorry. Yeah, I had binging and a bonging, but I was just concentrating on again. My apologies. It just threw me out. It's just having a wobbler this morning, so I'm back here. I've got no picture, but you can hear me, so that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Could I then go back to Trudi? Could you just introduce yourself, please, Trudi?
Yes, my name's Trudi Barlow, I'm licensing. I shall be presenting the case for the Foxcaf from the licensing perspective this morning.
Thank you. Nananka?
Yeah, Nananka Randall, licensing manager.
Thank you. Darren Rosa?
Good morning. Facilities and Catering Manager for Parks Catering, Parks Department of the BCP Council.
Thank you very much. Michael Rowland?
Hello, it's Michael Rowland. I'm Strategic Lead for Green Space and Conservation for BCP Council.
Thank you. Gareth Gosling?
Gareth Gosling, Dorset Police Sergeant.
Thank you. Louise Busfield?
Yeah, Louise Busfield, Licensing Officer, Dorset Police.
Thank you. And finally, I have a note regarding Councillor Jackie Edwards.
Good morning, Chairman. Yes, I'm Councillor Jackie Edwards, Ward Councillor for Redhill and Northbourne.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. In addition, as you're already probably aware, that we do have Democratic Service Officers in support for this morning's meeting. Before I run through the procedure, please may I check that all persons have given notice of their intention to speak and have been identified. And if there is no comment, I will take this as correct. Thank you. I will now explain the proposed procedure and order of speaking for the hearing as follows. The licensing officer presents the report. The applicant will make their application. Questions of the applicant by all parties, members of the committee, subcommittee to go first. Responsible authorities and other persons will make their representations. Questions of the responsible authorities and other persons, members of the committee, subcommittee to go first. All parties will be given an opportunity to sum up, with the party who speaks last to go first. The hearing will then conclude. The subcommittee will deliberate in private with the legal advisor and clerk present, and the notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day of the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. I will now ask all parties to confirm agreement on the proposed procedure and make representations. And once again, if I receive no representations, I will take that as correct and agreed. Finally, please may I remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they have already given in writing, but to expand on their written representations. All questions are to be asked through the chairman, and there will be no cross-examination of parties. I will now ask the licensing officer to present the report. Trudi, please.
Good morning, Chair. The application before you today is to consider whether to grant a premises licence Foxcaf situated in Redhill Park just off Redhill Drive. This application was originally due to be heard by the Licensing Subcommittee on the 31st of March, however this was cancelled due to the COVID-19 lockdown. The application is to permit plays, films, live and recorded music, Monday to Sunday, 11 AM till 10 PM, and the supply of alcohol Monday to Sunday from midday to 10 PM. However, after the hour of 7 PM in the evening until 10 PM, it will be not available to the general public, but pre-booked functions only. 24 interested parties made representations based on all 4 of the licensing objectives, namely the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance and protection of children from harm. Should the application be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with the licence and any conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any of the responsible authorities or interested parties may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudi. Do members have any questions for the officer at this point in time, please? Councillor Butt.
No question.
Councillor Farr.
Chairman.
No questions at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the applicant to make their application. I'm not sure if that will be Mr. Rosa or Mr. Rowland.
It's Mr. Rowland.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rowland. Please address the committee.
Okay, I'll try not to repeat what's been said within the application, but it's important to understand that this is an application for on-site sales of alcohol with food to increase the appeal of the park. It's not around special alcohol offers, it's not around creating a pub, and it's not creating a live music venue or a nightclub. It's more of something that would be more akin to a community hall or church hall rather than in terms of functions. What I would say is parks can suffer from a lot of antisocial behaviour, including drinking, drugs, vandalism, assault, and these incidents usually happen at night in quieter parks or in poorly managed parks. What we tend to find is that busy, popular parks with good facilities suffer less. Our ambition is to get more people to use our parks more often and for longer, and that's really important as we try to address issues around health and loneliness. So we want more people coming to the park, spending longer, allowing their children to play longer. We'd envisage early summer evenings to become a time when families spend longer in the park and children can play out for longer together, being active for longer. So if parents and guardians can enjoy a drink with some food, whilst children play, we can create a social, active and safe place where the latent supervision that they offer drives away antisocial behaviour rather than creates it. So the sort of antisocial behaviour that we see in the evenings in parks are people bringing cans of drinks into the park and acting antisocially, rather than people who were in the park using the facilities responsibly. So it's important to understand the difference between a licensed cafe and something like a pub or an off-licence. If you visit most National Trust gardens, a country pub or a museum, they will allow you to purchase alcohol with food without any detriment to other users in an environment where families are present. Small events such as family birthdays, anniversaries, wakes, or on an occasion, we might make an application for a wedding reception on the green, help cement the park as a community facility, just like I said, being a community hall. And it's important that Redhill Park is one of our 5 parks within Bournemouth. It's held charitably, and our objects of that charity are to manage it as a public park for the enjoyment of residents. So that's at the heart of everything we do. To continue with a financially viable offer at Redhill, the sale of alcohol will help us to continue to provide toilets, refreshments and supervision. It will help us to create a viable cafe. Our track record at sites like Boscombe Gardens, Slades Farm, at Boscombe Gardens, Slades Farm, Queen's Park and Winton Recreation Ground show that sensible development allows our parks to thrive and reduces antisocial behaviour, and that's just what we want to do here. We don't want to live in the fear of antisocial behaviour and batten down the hatches and design parks purely around that fear, or we'll end up with unattractive, expensive and unloved fortresses. So I would suggest that we allow sensible licensing provision and throw open the park gates for more people to come and enjoy Red Hill Park for longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. Did Mr. Rosa wish to add any comments to that at all?
No, I'm happy with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Members, do members have any questions for Mr. Rowland at all? Councillor Butt.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowland, you said an on-site sales with food, but there's also the sale of alcohol, which can be taken off premise. So if your intention is to sell food with alcohol, I'm wondering why the separate application for that particular licence, and why not just for the sale of food with alcohol. Thank you.
I'm not aware that we're not intending to have off sales. Whether that's an error on the form, I could ask Darren to respond to that. Darren.
Yes, Michael. We have no intention of selling alcohol off site, other than in the licensed areas. No, absolutely not. I will double check the paperwork again.
Thank you, Mr. Ross.
No, it's not Aaron.
Trudi, would you be able to just clarify that for members, please?
Yes, please. Mr. Chairman, just clarify that. I'll be extremely grateful. I may have misread it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, the application is not for off sales. It is only for on sales with food, and there'll be no off sales. The alcohol will be allowed to be taken outside, but only within the red demarked area as shown on Appendix 3 of the application. So there is no off sales, and all on sales will be subject to food purchase. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Trudi.
you for that clarification, Mr. Chairman. I'm most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Farr, did you have any questions at all?
Yes, I do have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Please do.
Okay, I was just wondering, have the nearby residents been consulted? I believe the road closest to the cafe would be Red Hill Drive. Thank you.
Would you be able to answer that for us, please, Trudi?
Certainly, the application is subject to the standard 28-day consultation period as for all licence applications. And as you will see from the pack, there have been at least 24 representations from residents in the area, including Red Hill Drive and Road, I believe. Sorry, I'm not familiar with the area myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudi. There's a request there to speak from Mr. Rowland. Mr. Rowland.
Yeah, I'd also say that Darren did hold a drop-in day at Red Hill, where we've invited local residents to come in and meet us and talk through any concerns. So, and that was well attended too.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. Do members have any further questions? Councillor Butt.
The letter from Gareth Gosling is unhappy with regard to the provision of prevention of children from harm, and the statement that it's not believed that this has been achieved with regard to the conditions, etc., that you provided on the operating schedule. Would you like to comment on that? Thank you.
Mr. Rowland.
Yeah, I would say that the licensed area is just the area outside the cafe. It's a small area, tarmac apron, where drinks could be served with food. I don't feel all our staff would be properly trained. The ethos of that site is no different to somewhere like Queen's Park, where we've been successfully operating a cafe next to a playground with a licensed premises for the past 4 years or so. And so I wouldn't agree with that. I might ask, we have met with the police and we've varied the application. So I wonder with the application as it stands, whether they're not quite so concerned anymore. And I would also say, you know, some of the other concerns that local residents had about glass in the swimming pool, there'd be no glass outside. The swimming pool is in a separate fenced area, so and the playground is in a separate fenced area. So again, this is in a grass area or next to a grass area, the other side of the playgrounds. It's within the same park, but I don't believe that there'd be a case that children would be brought to harm through this application.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. Councillor Farr, did you have any further questions for Mr. Rowland?
Yes, please. I'd be interested to know how many staff will be on the site at any one time, particularly in the daytime. Thank you.
Mr. Rowland?
It would depend on how busy the site is. We would have, you know, usually 1 or 2 staff in peak times. In the summer when it's busy, there'd be 2 staff, but it's important to remember that as a park service, we have staff all over the borough, so there would be support within, you know, a couple of minutes if there was a member of staff on their own. And we're talking, you know, where alcohol sales are likely to be higher. For example, if there was a function of some form, then there'd be 2 staff. I wonder if Darren would just confirm that.
Yes. Generally speaking, during the day, when all parts of the venue are operating, there'd be one serving through a hatch overlooking the pool. There'd also be somebody working back of house preparing the food. Then this is the minimum, and there'd also be somebody on the front or the floor clearing, serving, and facilitating the tables out the front of the venue, and also inside the venue. These guys would also be, certainly the member of staff that would be patrolling the front would also be doing half-hourly diary entries, just to update and keep all the other staff members informed of how the day's proceedings have been. So minimum of 3 staff working, which potentially when it's busy could go up to 5 or 6. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question, if I may. Thank you.
Yes, please, Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rowland was talking, and Darren Rosser, Mr. Rosser, was speaking with regard to glass and the risk of that reaching the pool area, etc. Could I just again have confirmation, because Mr. Gosling in his letter tells us there were some errors in the application. I just want to be absolutely clear that under M we have some 4 licensing objectives, and we have that any drinks taken from the cafe outside will be in disposable cups or plastic glasses. Now, if that were to be the case, then the risk of glass from this particular outlet would not be a matter for us to be concerned about. Could I just have confirmation that that is the case? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rowland, please, or Mr. Rosser.
I'll take this one, Darren Rosa. All of our product lines will be glass free, and where it's not achievable will be decanted into plasticware. A very similar operating model to what we have currently at the Woodpecker Cafe, and we've had no recorded problems of glass or incidences in this venue, in the Woodpecker venue. So, yep, definitely no glass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Rosser.
Thank you, Mr. Rosa. If there are no further questions from members, I would like to move to the responsible authorities. Can we start with the licensing authority? Nananka, did you wish to speak at all?
No, I'm just observing today.
Thank you very much. In which case then, can I turn to Sergeant Gosling, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
Can I firstly check with yourself that you've had the new paperwork that's come through from the applicant? It came through late yesterday. I just wanted to check that you've had sight of that.
So I'm just going to have to double check my emails, and could I ask Councillor Farr and Councillor Butt just to do the same, and if it's possible, Trudi, if you're able to assist on this item.
Yeah, you would have got the information last week, Chair. It just wasn't sent to the police. It was sent to all members last week by Democratic Thursday or Friday. And it wasn't additional information, it was just sort of backing up what they were doing. It's about notices that would be put up at the premises, etc.
Mr. Chairman,
and their training jobs.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, with respect, we've had a little glitch because we had information sent to an incorrect email, so I have not had that information. So I would be grateful if we could have a précis of that information, please, because I don't have it. And unless it can be emailed to me now, I'm not likely to get it. Thank you.
Would you be able to assist with that, Trudi, at all?
Certainly, I will try and find it. Democratic should also have it because I believe Nicola sent it last week.
I'm just going to double check my emails. Sergeant Gosling, could you just confirm exactly what it is that was sent through?
So we've received details of the Park Cafe's alcohol service training and information, which is in relation to alcohol service at Fox Cafe. We've received some notices as to what's proposed to be displayed at the cafe. There's some details of amendments after a meeting with the police. There is a budgetary proposal document for the CCTV, the new system planned at the Fox Cafe, and I believe that to be. Oh, there was also, I believe, possibly some notes in respect of the 24 representations that have been made in respect of the points that have been raised. Now, I haven't had sight of those 24 and can only assume that you have.
Just to confirm, Sergeant Gosling, yes, I have, and they're notices of that will be displayed at the Fox Cafe. So they were forwarded to all members last week.
And the representations from the local residents?
The representations, I believe, are appendix to the agenda.
Okay.
I've had a request to speak from the legal officer. Linda, would you be kind enough to address the committee?
Yeah, all the representations made by members of the public were part of the agenda that was forwarded to everybody at the beginning of last week, I understand. And the information from Parks was forwarded to members on the 11th of June. Councillor Butt, I know there was an email issue with some of yours, so I've just forwarded you all that information just now. So if you look at your current emails,
thank you very much.
You should be able to click on those as we go, and certainly you'll be able to have a look you know, we can retire at the end before we go into deliberations about the application anyway, and have a good look through, because there are a number of attachments. Most of them are quite small. They are generally posters and that type of information that they obviously plan to use around the Fox Cafe should their licence be granted. So I can forward that email to Councillor Flagg and Councillor Fire, if that's easier for you, or if you managed to find it from the 11th of June.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Linda. There is a plethora of them. There is. I am in safe receipt. I was wondering whether we could have a very, very short adjournment, Mr. Chairman, just perhaps 5 minutes to have a quick praise say of these. There are quite a few of them, but it's completely within your gift. Thank you.
Just to confirm that I did receive those documents, and most of them are Word documents, but I'm happy just to adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes in order that Councillor Butt can peruse those documents.
I'm grateful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Butt, I suggest that the main one that's got any amount of reading is the first one, Fox representations and responses. If you look at that one first, and then obviously there's information about the training document. The part.
Thank you, members. Can I ask Sergeant Gosling to address the committee, please? Sergeant Gosling.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, did Councillor Butt have some further questions for the applicant on the? I just wonder whether it might be prudent to deal with that to begin with. But I haven't really sort of started, if you like.
Mr. Chairman?
Councillor Butt?
Yes, I actually had a question for Sergeant Gosling before that. Sergeant Gosling says in his letter that there are some mistakes on the application. If there are mistakes, I'd be grateful if he could point the subcommittee to those mistakes. And then I have a question for Mr. Rowland with regard to a couple of the posters. Thank you.
Could Councillor Butt, could you ask the questions to Councillor Rowland first, so that we can then move on with Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, of course I can, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to do that. On poster 4, it says that no glass permitted in the pool and play park areas. On poster 5, it states that it doesn't. It's 5 poster 4. What I'm finding difficult to understand there is that as no glass is provided by it's a glass-free, only glass-free policy, why would Fox then say that no glass is allowed in the pool? Because surely that jurisdiction is the responsibility of the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Pool, and not the responsibility of Fox, because they don't sell anything in glass. I'm just confused as to why they would refer to that. It's relevant in a way, but it's not relevant with regard to their responsibility. I look for advice. Thank you.
Mr. Rowland, would you care to address that issue, please?
Yes, park cafes are owned by BCP Council. So we own and manage park as well as own and manage the cafe. So the reason we would put notices on the play park and the paddling pool would be for the wider community, is to ensure that people don't bring stuff in and take it into those areas. So we have an organisation who's looking after the cafe with a wider responsibility towards the park, and the aim is that that's a fairly seamless operation.
Right, thank you. I'm confused now because I'm absolutely certain, Mr. Chairman, I must have imagined it, that I saw that it was a statement from Fox that they had a glass-free policy, and now I cannot find it. So is that just me, or is it in there somewhere and I have missed it?
Could I ask Trudi, are you able to advise us on that, please?
Oh,
Yes, certainly, Mr.
Sorry to cut across, Trudi. I do beg your pardon. It's on poster 5, and it says, for health and safety, Fox Cafe operates a no glass policy, and therefore I'm still incredulous as to why you would say no glass, because any glass would not be from your premise, or is that just a generalistic statement with regard to your management of the area? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think I'll go back to Mr. Rowland, because my understanding of the statement was that no glass is to be brought onto the premises by another. Is my understanding of that correct, Mr. Rowland?
So the cafe will not provide anybody with glass outside the cafe at all. What we can't, as a council, so as the applicant is BCP Council, as a council, we can still, where we've had a number of concerns from residents about there being glass in the paddling pool, we can try to address that as a whole in terms of management of the park. So if other people come into the park and bring bottles from elsewhere, we would be saying to them, do not take those into playgrounds or into the paddling pool area. But we do get people who buy alcohol outside of the park who come and sit on the grass. We don't encourage it, but we recognise it happens. and therefore putting signs on the gates of the playground to discourage anyone from taking alcohol into those spaces is sensible.
Thank you. I'm grateful for the clarification. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. Thank you, Councillor Butt. Sergeant Gosling, would you be kind enough to address the committee, please?
Yes, of course, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. So, I guess really, if I would, I'll start with a bit of the history of this park. I've been a police officer for almost 14 years, and I've done the bulk of my working in the North Bournemouth area. So I'm quite familiar with the area, and I'm quite familiar with, unfortunately, the problems that we do experience on and off, and it kind of goes from season to season. Sometimes year to year, we see peaks, and we see troughs in the numbers of reported cases of antisocial behaviour, etc. So it's really a park that, whilst it's a wonderful facility, because it's so open, it's very, very difficult to control. We've got a large field area, we have a large play park area, we've got the cafe, and there's various other sporting areas such as various greens and clubs that have been there throughout the years. And I think the problems that we do get vary not only by season, but I think quite critically as far as the licence applicant is concerned, between the daytime and evening. Of course, we do see a large number of families attend during the daytime to use the fantastic facilities available at Redhill Park. And like I said, during the day, because we have those families, we don't really experience the level of, if you like, antisocial behaviour, which tends to come more into the evenings when the families are going home, and as the applicant is trying to encourage, they want people to stay out a little bit later to try and keep the families there present. I'm not sure that alcohol is the way to do that, but that's one for you as the licensing subcommittee. Back to the application itself, I think the one thing that hasn't been made clear here, and I think perhaps when the applicant has the next opportunity to speak, perhaps they can clarify, because I think we have an application here that covers both the daytime trade for alcohol with food. So I guess that's going to be generally your lunch and your evening meals. But then we have this extra facility for the functions, because it is detailed at various stages, but it is then conflicted in other areas where, for example, the Fox Cafe alcohol policy poster states there clearly all alcohol must be purchased with food. But then we do have it throughout, the training also covers that. But then we do have other areas of the application where there is certain exemptions being, or exceptions being applied for, where there will be private functions where no food will be required to go alongside it. So I think that needs to be sort of fully clarified to understand what it is that we're looking at. And I think that's where our biggest concern is where we've got these evening functions, and there will be a variety, and there certainly is enough reference in here in the paperwork for me to understand that that's going to be more of a wet-led, as we would refer to it, rather than a food-led offering. So I've already touched on it as far as Redhill Park's concerned, but the area is very much open. So it's, if you like, it's an island park where it's surrounded by roads, surrounded by residential areas. And I guess our concern would be that there is that lack of control around that provision of alcohol. We've already had a conversation around the numbers of staff that would be present, and I'm certainly not satisfied that that number of staff would be sufficient to have that level of control over the on-sales license that's being applied for. If you take, for example, that the applicant is trying to encourage families into the park, and certainly into that evening period, I'm assuming up till 7 o'clock, as members of the public. We would be concerned that where you've got the families and you've got the children playing around in the play park, but you've got the adults that can't, presume that they're sat there with a glass of wine or a bottle of beer, or a cup of beer, that they're then having to stay within the premises because of the concerns that have been identified by the applicant and accepted by the applicant. So you've then got that separation between the children, if you like, running free, and the adults, due to the fact that they have to stay on site with their alcohol, would need to stay there, and I think that causes a slight issue as well. The comparison I think made with the National Trust is an interesting one. It's generally, National Trust properties, as many are aware, are very enclosed. They have the control generally by way of an admission charge or some sort of gate or something like that. I think that, again, highlights to me, it's an interesting comparison, but I think it highlights where perhaps the National Trust can make those sites work, and perhaps without the same level of concern that we would have here. One of the points that I picked up in the information that was sent to us yesterday, I've only had an opportunity to go through it very briefly this morning, but there is mention within the application of the CCTV covering one external area, but when you look at under paragraph 3, the schedule of services from Chromavision, it doesn't cover any outside area as far as I can see, other than a camera that points from the inside outside, just at the front door. So again, I think that it's not very helpful as far as satisfying our concerns around covering the outside area. It is good to be using our parks in a positive way. There's absolutely no doubt around that, and holding events, and we've seen many, I think BCP and Dorset County as well, in my experience, the events that can be held are fantastic. I just don't see that it necessarily has to have that alcohol element to it, which does bring that level of concern to us. I think it will be difficult for the local neighbourhood policing team that work with the local communities, in my view, very effectively to tackle the problems. And you'll see from the representations made by the local residents that we do still have some way to go. But it will make it difficult where we have an alcohol provision on site, and we are actually trying to then discourage alcohol-related and social behaviour and crime, because there will be that obvious point being made by people that are consuming the alcohol on site and in the field areas and what have you. Well, I can buy a beer there, so what's the difference? And I accept that the difference will be that there's an on-site element to it. But they will argue that essentially the alcohol is one and the same. And I think it would be a shame to conflict with what we're trying to achieve. And I think we are making progress. There's some progress to be made. But as the local inspector, in the conversation that I've had with him, his concerns with the application are due to the location near to the children's area, and it's likely that a negative impact will follow, especially during the summer months, which is when we see our peak period of antisocial behaviour, and that's likely to be the peak period for any events to be held at the location as well. So I appreciate I've given you quite a lot of information there. But the concerns are in relation to what's being offered, and again, I think there needs to be that clarity around the functions and really what's being driven in the evenings. And I think if the subcommittee were minded to provide or to allow a license to be granted for the site, I think one of the things I picked up earlier was certainly in relation to the concerns around the minimum staffing, because having sufficient staff to patrol the area and to make sure that the licensing objectives are being met and the conditions are not being breached in any way, I think that would be absolutely key to have a minimum staffing there. But at this point, I will leave it at there. And if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. Before I ask members, I have a question myself. During your meeting with the applicant, did you discuss at all the point that you make in your letter regarding off sales?
Yes, we did. So that was one of the largest. Yeah, that was one of the biggest issues, really, because just the idea of taking the alcohol away from that site and then into the children's areas which are adjacent would be a huge concern. So yes, we did discuss that.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. The reason I said that was because there's no mention of it in terms of the amendments after the meeting with the applicant, which we've all been provided with.
That's right. I think one of the things that we do when we hold site visits to discuss new applications is to really try and highlight our concerns. It's not generally our place to provide the advice. It's simply to highlight the concerns, and then it's for the applicant then to work out how they can incorporate those concerns into their operating schedule, and then they can bring forward an amended application or make some changes that would satisfy those concerns. And I think from our conversation with the operators, I think they were very open to our concerns. And like I said, this is in relation to the documents that include the amendments after the meetings with the police. That's their notes taken following the meeting, and obviously some of the key areas that we've raised. So.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. Do members have any questions for Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. My question stands to Sergeant Gosling in his letter. Just for clarification for the committee, the details contained in the application contains a variety of errors. We wouldn't know what those errors were, so I'd be very grateful if the Sergeant would share those with us, or if they have been amended, if he could tell us if that's the case and what they were and how amended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, so the application, following the conversation with the applicants, it was clear that the content of the application was very much based upon another site, so the Woodpecker site at Queen's Park, and it was clear that some of the conditions that had been put in to the document for the Fox Cafe weren't necessarily fitting for the Fox Cafe, and there were references to the Woodpecker site and various conditions in there that were being offered that would make it fairly impossible to adhere to.
Okay, I'm not really any the wiser. So have they been removed? Have they been resolved?
That's been addressed, I think, and I think Trudi can probably confirm that, because we did highlight them to the licensing authority, and I think they have been dealt with now.
I would look forward to that confirmation, Mr. Chairman, if you could, from legal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I also have an extra one, Trudi, as well, which is the letter from Sergeant Gosling makes note of the inclusion of provision of alcohol for off-sales consumption, but I'm being reminded that the application does not include off-sales. So could you clarify that one as well, please?
Yes, Chair. I'll take it in reverse order. Your question regarding off sales. The premises has never asked for off sales. It has always been on sales. That hasn't been changed since the initial application. I don't know. You'd have to ask Sergeant Gosling regarding that. With regard to Councillor Butt and your inquiry about discrepancies, the only discrepancy that I was aware of was in section M, part A, point 4, states only food and drink purchased from Woodpecker Cafe as opposed to Fox Cafe. I believe this is a typographical error, as Sergeant Gosling has alluded to. It was copied from another application. I am not aware of any other known errors, but obviously Sergeant Gosling may be able to elaborate if there is something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudi.
Mr. Chairman, before you give, Mr. Chairman, before you give Sergeant Gosling the opportunity to answer that, could I just ask that the incorrect information provided on the application, this does not invalidate the application per se. We are still okay to be considering this matter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think given the advice by the officer was that it was a typographical error in terms of stating woodpecker rather than the Fox Cafe, but everything else is in order. Am I correct in saying that, Trudi?
Yes, I mean, imagine there are some premises that the cafe within them is called the same throughout the country. If you go into a big sort of department store, they'll call their cafe the same thing. So it was just, as I said, I don't feel it detracted from anything, and it was just merely a typographical error.
Thank you, Trudi.
I will accept that advice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Sergeant Gosling, did you wish to come back at all?
Yes, if I would. I think the other area that was to be taken out from the original application was in relation to the showing of sport. I think there was no intention for sport to be shown, which is again something that was relevant for Woodpecker Cafe but not for the Fox Cafe.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling, and that, members, is included in the amendment sheet to remove. So L was actually taken out. Councillor Farr, did you have any questions at all of Sergeant Gosling?
Yes, it's just come to mind. There's the comparison between the two parks with the Woodpecker and the Fox Cafe, with their geographical locations and sort of antisocial behaviour aspect, which could be related to alcohol. Is it sort of the same with Red Hill Park and Queen's Park? Thank you.
So, again, from my experience of working in North Bournemouth area for many years, unfortunately, the level of antisocial behaviour we get due to the makeup of Red Hill Park is more than we get at Queen's Park. There will be sort of reasons due to the infrastructure there and the control that's within the park, and certain things will be more attractive to those partaking in the antisocial behaviour. But it's generally, we do get more reports of antisocial behaviour at Red Hill Park.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, if I may.
Councillor Butt, please.
Thank you very much. Sergeant Gosling, you spoke about minimum staffing, and I'd like advice, please, from Environment with regard, is it deemed to be minimum? And also with regard to the camera, if that was effective or would be deemed to be effective. Now, as we know, both of those can be overcome because the amount of staff required can be put in and the camera can be made effective. But your point in case to me is that the application, if so granted, would, in your opinion, exacerbate the present situation with regard to antisocial behaviour and everything that sits around that. Could I just have clarification on those 3 points? Thank you, Sergeant.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we try and apply a balanced approach when making any representation. And first and foremost, our position is resolute as far as the fact that we do have significant concerns that introducing an alcohol licence to this area will risk exacerbating the problems that we're trying to tackle. That said, if the licence were to be granted, I think some of the key areas for consideration would be around certainly addressing the idea to incorporate some external CCTV, and also the ensuring that we're not just solely reliant on notices. And I think I'm seeing a sort of move towards that, and I think that's something that's a bit worrying, where we feel that we can put some notices up, encourage the public, and hope that that will work. And I think there certainly would be a responsibility here to have sufficient staff to be able to apply that level of control that would be necessary if the licence were to be granted.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. Could we have a comment, please, Mr. Chairman, on the definition of sufficient staff with regard to this application, if that's possible? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Sergeant Gosling, did you have any numbers in mind, or is there a particular guidance that members should be referring to with regards to staffing levels?
It's very, very difficult, because you talk about, as I alluded in the details that I presented earlier, you're talking about very different risks. The daytime is a risk alone, because it's an on-sales license. There needs to ensure that level of certainty that people aren't going to leave the site with alcohol. I'm not sure that half an hour, every half hour, is sufficient, because I think there is a risk there. But I think moving towards my larger concern, which is in relation to the functions, depending on the nature of those functions, the volume of people attending those functions, I think that's when the alcohol will become an issue, in line with whatever the demographic of that function is and what the theme is, etc. And the numbers of staff required will need to be very much fluid, but there would have to be I do feel that there would have to be a minimum level as incorporated into any sort of risk assessment. But it would be so difficult, because the applicant has incorporated already a condition and the prevention of public nuisance that, dependent on the event, additional outside security may be employed, such as SIA door supervisors. Well, I would hope that they would all be SIA door registered supervisors. But essentially, again, you're talking there about events being held, and there would need to be risk assessments carried out. And I think you, as the subcommittee, need to be satisfied that that risk, whatever that might present itself as, is manageable.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. Can I ask Mr. Rowland, are you able to advise the committee in terms of the method for risk assessing the requirement of staff present, please?
Okay, so what we have to remember is it's not a large building. It was a former bowls pavilion. The bowls club closed a couple of years ago, and it's sat empty for a while, and we've brought it back so we can retain public toilets and refreshments in the park. The capacity for that site would be up to 40 people. We're not looking at huge gatherings. In terms of staff numbers, there would always be at least 2 on site. So if we were looking at during the day, when we had lower numbers of customers, sort of early in the day, there'd be at least 2 staff. Building up to 5, 6 for a function, something like that. I could ask Darren to clarify. Our experience at Woodpecker has been that there are certain parties we don't book in. So if someone's got an 18th birthday party, that's not the sort of business we want to attract. The sort of things we do attract are wakes, 50th parties. That sort of we want to encourage family functions and gatherings that don't cause us problems as a more wider issue in the park. We want people to come in and enjoy the park and think fondly of it. So Darren, could you add whether, in terms of if we had a maximum number of 40, how many staff we would have on?
Yes, thanks, Michael. Really, it's based on the floor space in the outside area that will be licensed. So, referring to Sergeant Gosling, it's no way a 30-minute check on the area. It's actually having a staff member to patrol that area who will be making records in our diaries, our daily procedure, which is included in our training manual, using the refusal and incident book. So we'll fill that in every half an hour. But with regards to size, a roaming staff member patrolling inside and outside, servicing 8 tables outside, I believe is sufficient. Somebody inside who will be trading, selling ice creams and cold drinks out the side can also keep eyes on that outside licensed area. And we also have somebody working back of house as well. So they'll also be able to oversee what's going on inside. You know, that's how I see a general day going. In the evenings, it all comes down to what sort of party it is. It could be anything from a 50th birthday party. It could be a kid's birthday party, as in children. We do a lot of children's parties in the cafes. It could be a wake. It could be a movie night. It could be a school fete. So everything would be assessed on the application when they come and make a booking. With all of our bookings as well, they pay a deposit. They pay a room hire fee. We meet the clients. We get a clear understanding of what the function is going to be, and then we plan ahead going forward with that information. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosa.
Yes, thank you. The map which is shown, I think it's 33 of page 86, shows the red boundary line, which is quite a large area where the alcohol can be consumed. My concern is not so much for 40 people at a function or within the area in front of the premise, but that large area there. What's the risk assessment there with regard to how that would be better managed? And with the deepest of respect, it's all very well putting things in notebooks and making records, but what is the process with regard to actioning those and how quickly to gain assistance if required? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Can I ask Trudi, please, to address the committee before I ask Mr. Rowland to respond?
Yes, sorry, Chair. Yes, Councillor Butt, the initial application, which is probably the plan that I believe you're looking at, is the one where it's got the sort of little red line round the building and then a big red line round what was formerly the bowling green. Am I correct? Is that the one you're looking at? Hello?
I'm fairly certain that's correct, yes.
Yeah, if you look at Appendix 3, as you see, that shows the revised area which has taken that bowling green off. So it is basically only the red line around the building with that little apron outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudi. Yes, I understand. Are members happy with that and aware that we should be looking at Appendix 3 in terms of the licensed area? Councillor Butt?
Yes, I'm happy with that, Mr. Chairman. It's just I think that perhaps we didn't really need the first information in the first instance, and we should have had perhaps a better red hand rule with regard to the amendment. But I'm grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Farr, are you happy with the item at Appendix 3?
I'm happy with that. Thank you
very much. Mr. Rowland, would you be kind enough to respond, please?
So just being clear, it was how would we manage the outdoor space? Is that correct? Is that what we were?
I believe that's correct. Am I correct in saying that, Councillor Butt?
Yes, that's correct. Although now, of course, with the bowling green area rather subsumed, it isn't such a large ask. But since I asked the question, I'd be grateful to receive the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland, please.
I mean, the reason why we wanted that apron out the front is obviously people like to sit outside. If you're sat there with a drink, you can see across towards the paddling pool and the playground. You can also take in the sun. So that the idea of that area really is around use of it during the day for tables and chairs. I guess for evening functions, we would have to assess that carefully with the sort of event that there was. So again, if it's early evening and you're looking at people stood outside for a 50th having a glass of wine, perhaps that's not so much of an issue. I could probably ask Darren to look at that in more detail, but I wouldn't be aware of us having extended that area for a large party late into the evening. Darren?
No, Michael, we wouldn't. It's the same floor space, same area. If it was an evening party and it required more staff to patrol the area, we would do that as part of our function plan and our operating procedures. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Is that an offer or is that a condition? Because Mr. Rowland said we would have to assess carefully. My concern there is before we come to an application, all areas and issues should be assessed prior to application and not ongoing. So I'd be grateful if that could be confirmed. Thank you.
Mr. Rowland?
So I'm saying in terms of taking a booking, we would always be considering our neighbours. So if we were, for example, if someone does, like we do at Queen's Park, where we've had requests for 18th birthdays, our experiences are that they are noisy, we tend to turn them down. If we felt there was a risk of significant noise or noise that might upset the neighbours from an outdoor space that would be acceptable indoors, we would keep the event indoors. If it was something that we felt was likely to raise complaints outside, we wouldn't do it. It's not in our interest to generate complaints from the neighbours. I don't know how that's written into a policy. It can certainly be written into an operating policy. I'm not sure how that might work with licensing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm grateful. I'm at a loss as to how that might be covered myself, so I would look to advice, but I think that the general sentiment is there that obviously you would be careful in your assessment of who did what and who was using your premise with regard to the harm that it might bring to the public and, of course, our four I can't think of the word now. The four
licensing objectives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Tongue-tied there for a minute, bless you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Councillor Black. Councillor Farr, did you have any further questions at all?
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now move on then to Councillor Jackie Edwards? Councillor Edwards, would you like to address the committee, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of residents in Redhill and Northbourne and those who live near to the Fox Cafe in Redhill Park. Redhill Park is primarily well known as a family park with a large children's play section. Residents have submitted their objections to this application as they have a number of concerns. The major concern seems to be the close proximity of the cafe to the children's playground and paddling pool. All ages of children enjoy the excellent facilities here, and the idea of alcohol being available, even with food, and drunk throughout the day in full view of children worries many residents. Redhill Park is predominantly a family-friendly area, with the cafe surrounded by well-used play facilities, tennis courts, the Mugger and a very large playing field. I ask, is providing alcohol at the cafe a responsible action? Will any misuse of alcohol be harmful to the children happily playing close by? It is unlikely that busy staff would be able to monitor where customers drink the alcohol and whether it will encourage many others to bring their own. For those who know the park, the cafe is very visible to users of the paddling pool. There are also some reservations, especially in connection to the antisocial behaviour in the park, which increases in the summer months. The summer being the most popular time when the cafe will be open and more alcohol likely to be served. Redhill Park is no different to other local public spaces in BCP that suffer from noisy groups gathering at night. Those residents who live particularly close to this park do from time to time suffer the consequences of disturbed sleep from loud music and other noise from parked cars. Those who live closest to Fox Cafe feel that noise from those using the facility will only increase with the extra volume of people leaving the venue in the evening. Residents are also worried that they may also have the nuisance of more street parking once the car park is full, and a consequential increase in noise from those returning to their vehicles. If alcohol is served in what is advertised as a cafe, is this appropriate for this type of venue? Will the police and parks resources be put under more pressure to ensure children will be protected, whilst ensuring there will not be an increase in public nuisance? Whilst people understand the cafe needs to be viable, but is serving alcohol the answer? What message are we sending out to the public when it's well known alcohol harms health? Will alcohol add to the overall enjoyment of all users in this family park? I fail to see, apart from increasing income for Fox Cafe, any real benefits in selling alcohol here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. I've had a request to speak from the legal officer. Linda, would you like to address the committee, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Edwards has finished now, but I just wanted to remind her that she didn't make a rep herself in respect to this application. She's only representing her residents, and she needs to make sure that what she says to you is contained by what was in those residents' representations, those that she's representing. Maybe we could just have some clarity from Councillor Edwards. Are you representing all 23? Has that agreement been made, or was it just some of the residents you were representing?
Councillor Edwards?
No, it was some of the residents that I'm representing, but I understood that I couldn't actually make my own representation, that I had to only represent those that asked me to. Or am I wrong on that?
You are wrong. You're entitled to make your own rep as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Maybe we can just have clarity. I think Trudi might be able to clarify for us which of the residents she was representing with reference to the reps that are in the pack of papers that we've got.
Thank you, Linda. My information is that Councillor Edwards was representing residents Mrs. Summerall and Mrs. Skinner. Trudi, are you able to help on this, please?
I believe that is correct. I'm sure Councillor Edwards will be able to tell you exactly who's asked her to speak on their behalf.
Thank you. That's fine. We can look those up later, particularly. Yeah. That I'm not taking away from any of the other reps that you've received. I mean, all of them are important. All need to be considered. But you can do that on the paperwork.
Thank you, Linda. Did members have any questions for Councillor Edwards at all? Councillor Butt.
My point would have been the point of clarification. I'm grateful to Linda Cole for taking that on board for us. No questions, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Councillor Farr.
Same again, no questions, but thank you for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'd now like to move on to the summing up, and could I ask Councillor Edwards if there's anything else she wishes to add to her statement that she may have forgotten or may help members to come to their decision. Councillor Edwards, please.
No, I haven't got anything further to add, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sergeant Gosling.
Yes, I think I really want to express this concern that we've got around having provision that has to have alcohol. I think BCP have got a fantastic reputation for having events that and facilities that are not alcohol linked to alcohol, and I think I would encourage you to consider that as an option in this case. I think it is very difficult to to be able to prove what types of crime will happen. What we do know is what happens now, and that's why you've received so many representations from the public, those who know better than I do about the issues that are at Red Hill Park, and they're the people I think whose voices I think really need to be heard today, and perhaps in a ordinary situation when we would all be in a chamber. One of the council buildings, perhaps they would be there as well, but it's obviously quite difficult. This would be the departure, I think, from a generally daytime site, more into an evening with an unknown variety of different events and functions. I think that's our concern here. That really is what it boils down to, and that's aside from the really obvious concerns that has already been highlighted by Councillor Edwards and some of the local residents around this mix of children and alcohol, and children's facilities and sporting facilities, leisure and alcohol. And I think that's where our mix here is perhaps not terribly positive. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergeant Gosling. And before I move to the applicant, can I just check for clarification that the licensing authority is not making any representations on this application?
Chair, Trudi, Barlow here. The licensing authority has not made any representations to this application. No other responsible authority has made a representation either.
Thank you very much. And finally then, could I move to Mr. Rowland? Mr. Rowland, would you like to sum up to the committee in support of your application, please?
I would say that it's important to understand that parks are under enormous pressure. We have a great responsibility, and we understand that, and we know we need to increase the number of people visiting our parks for the benefit of their health and for them to remain active, and that is something we work really hard to achieve. It's also important to note that alcohol is not always drunk irresponsibly, and our aim here isn't to encourage people to drink, it's to encourage people to stay a little longer in the park, to encourage people to use a park when they might go home instead. So when at the end of a week that a family think, what should we do on a Friday night? Instead of a parent standing at the edge of a playground for 20 minutes watching their children play and then going home because they've had enough themselves, that they might meet some friends and stay a bit longer in the park and allow their children to spend an hour or two in the park rather than that 20-30 minutes, giving the children more opportunity to exercise. We want people to be social, we want people to be free from loneliness, and we want to make sure that our parks function in that way. If you go to any decent park, and the best parks in the world, you will find cafes that serve a glass of wine or a beer, whether that's in Oslo, whether it's in Paris or Berlin or New York. You will find places that do sell alcohol responsibly. The issues that we have at Red Hill around antisocial behaviour are predominantly coming where we're going into the night or where the park is empty. If we can increase the number of people using the park sociably and sensibly, we can tackle antisocial behaviour, and it's the only way that we know to tackle antisocial behaviour effectively. I'm not saying through alcohol, it's not essential that parks have alcohol, but it's part of a big mix of offers that we provide. So we do provide tennis at Red Hill, we provide recreation space, whether it's a ball court or a playground or a paddling pool or a cafe, but we want that wide mix to make sure that as many people as possible can use the park. So we're all for responsible use of park and to make sure that we can generate enough income to be able to continue to invest in the park and continue to make it a better place and make sure it appeals to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowland. I will now conclude the hearing. At the end of this meeting, the subcommittee will adjourn in private with the legal advisor and the clerk to deliberate. Notification of the subcommittee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held. The notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate, and I will now ask the legal advisor to explain the right of appeal. Mrs. Cole, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's Linda Cole. There will be a right of appeal to any decision that is made by the licensing subcommittee today, and that appeal should be made to Dorset Magistrates Court within 21 days of formal notification of the decision. The decision will, as the Chair has said, will come to you in writing rather than verbally at the end of proceedings today.
Thank you, Linda. I will now adjourn the meeting for 5 minutes to enable excuse me, participants for the next hearing to join the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning. Welcome back, members. The next item on the agenda will be heard in exempt session. Exclusion of the press and public. In relation to the next item of business appearing today, the committee is asked to consider the following resolution: that under section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 1 and 2 in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in withholding the information outweighs such interest in disclosing the information. Do I have a proposal, please?
So, happily propose, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I was trying to get my microphone working.
Thank you, Councillor Butt, and I'm sure that we're all in favour of that. Thank you.
Yes, all in favour.
Thank you. I now just wait to hear from Mr. Richard Jones, please.